Joe Biden is really living up to the view of him that the left already had. Here's a new report as to what's happening at the border.
Go now to the border, though, where there are new concerns about another potential humanitarian crisis. Two sources confirmed to NBC News that more than 3,200 unaccompanied migrant children are in Border Patrol custody. That number is a record. Nearly half of the children have been held beyond the 3-day legal limit, some in holding cells that aren't designed for kids. And according to a source, nearly 170 of these children are under the age of 13. The New York Times was first to report the number of detained children, and the paper, citing internal Customs and Border Patrol documents, reported that the number has tripled in the last 2 weeks. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas led a team of senior administration officials to the southern border on Saturday to tour holding facilities. The White House says those officials intend to brief President Biden about what they've found.
So everybody's going to go after him for this. The right-wingers are making an incredibly dumb argument of like, looks like Biden opened the borders. That's what happened. Biden's pro-open borders. He's listening to the open borders Democratic politicians. By the way, there's like -6 of them. Even the ones who you think are open borders, when you listen to them talk, they're not describing open borders at all. They're not in favor of literally just opening borders. If anything, the strongest support for open borders I've ever seen is actually from the libertarian community. There are real anti-government, small government libertarians who say, a border is inherently oppressive or whatever, and they want to get rid of the border. The lefty Congress people are not in favor of open borders, in the same way that they're not in favor of defund the police. Maybe Cory Bush is, but defund the police is not the conception that people think of, like totally abolish the police and have no law enforcement. The idea is to like reduce the funding and then give the funding to social services so that, maybe a mental health professional shows up when they're needed as opposed to somebody with a gun. Anyway, I digress. The right wing is saying, oh, look, more people at the border. Biden opened the borders. Biden opened the borders. Nonsense. In fact, the border is still closed, but people are coming in, especially with COVID. There are border restrictions, but people are circumventing that and coming in illegally. So that's what the right is saying. The left is saying, well. You guys railed against Trump's kids in cages. There are still kids in cages. And in fact, there are more kids in cages than before. That's a fact. And the euphemisms and the phrasing that mainstream media is using now that it's Biden who's the president is amazing. Like, you'll see the comparisons, like kids locked in cages under Trump, and then it becomes like temporary holding facility for minors with various accoutrements. I'm making that up, but like the phrasing is so much more like value neutral and benign when describing the exact same thing happening under Biden. And it reminds me, there was the famous picture of a kid in a cage that resurfaced under the Trump administration. Everybody was blaming Trump. Turns out the picture was from Obama and Biden's era. So yeah, there are kids in cages. There's still kids in cages. And now I'm sorry, you just don't hear as much noise about it now that Biden's president. Elite liberals are just sort of ignoring it now. The only people who are being consistent are really the left, who was against it under Trump, and now they're against it under Biden. But yeah, this gets to a broader question of what the hell do we do with this issue? I would argue that the real long-term solution is to make it so that people don't want to leave their home countries. And I know that might be a little bit simplistic to talk about this issue in that way, but is it really? Because when you talk about long-term goals, yeah, if you, for example, end the drug war, that would greatly diminish the power of the cartels, which would make these places that these immigrants are fleeing from a lot better. People usually don't want to leave everything they've ever known. They don't want to leave their homeland. They don't want to do it. They do it because they have to do it. They feel like they have to do it because of violence, crime, whatever it may be. So yes, what you'd want to do is end the drug war, legalize, tax, and regulate drugs, but then also make it so that the economic situation is not so terrible as well. So exploitative trade deals also are a part of this. You want to revitalize the local economies where these people are fleeing from and just make it so that that's not what they end up doing. That's not what they feel like they have to do. So really that's the answer, but that's a more complex question, and we're talking about long-term solutions. And unfortunately, the way everything is discussed now is, what do we do in the short term? What do we do about this? And I mean, I hate to say this part of it, but that I don't even know. I have no idea. Like, what do you do in the short term with this? I don't know. Do you take the kids who just crossed the border and immediately send them back because people would attack you for that? Do you take them and keep them in these facilities? People would attack you for that. Do you let them in and then just release them among the broader population? People would come after you for that. There's literally no good answer. So really the entire conversation should be the long-term conversation.